Here is something you have done, almost certainly, and felt embarrassed about. Someone walks up to you, warm, certain, says it's good to see you again. And you have nothing, no name, no memory of the room you supposedly met in. You smile and stall and hope they say something that gives it away. You decide you're just bad with faces. You're not bad with faces. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do, and it made a decision about that person without telling you. It decided they were safe. And safe is the one thing your memory was designed to throw away. Now think of a different face. Someone who lied to you once, cheated you, humiliated you, took something. You can see that face right now, can't you? The exact expression. You haven't thought about them in years and they're still in there, sharp, like the file was never allowed to fade. That is not an accident, and it is not a flaw. Your memory for faces runs on a rule nobody ever told you about, and the rule is older than language. By the end of this, you'll know the part of your brain that does nothing but read faces, why it quietly fails on the people who mean you no harm. The experiment where people remembered the faces of cheaters and forgot the faces of the kind, and the unsettling flip side, the moment where this same system invents a face that was never there and sends the wrong person to prison. Keep that liar's face in mind. We're coming back for it. Let's go through it carefully. Your brain has a piece of tissue that does almost nothing but faces, not objects, not words. Faces. In 1997, Nancy Canwisher and her colleagues Josh McDermott and Marvin Chun put people in a scanner at MIT and showed them faces, then houses, then hands, then scrambled images. One patch on the underside of the brain, in the fusiform gyrus, lit up for faces and stayed quiet for nearly everything else. They named it the fusiform face area. Most of us have a stronger one on the right side of the head. It is not a metaphor for the part of you that's good with people. It is a physical region the size of a small coin running a dedicated program. And the program is strange. You do not recognize a face the way you recognize a coffee mug, feature by feature, handle, rim, color. You recognize it all at once, as a whole, a single configuration. Researchers call this holistic processing. The spacing between the eyes, the width of the jaw, the relationship of every part to every other part, collapsed into one impression. Margaret Tsao and Marge Livingstone, reviewing the field in 2008, described this as specialized machinery, a system that treats a face as an indivisible thing rather than a pile of parts. That is why a face turned upside down becomes almost unreadable. The features are all still there. You just can't run the program on them. Flip a photo of someone you know, and you'll struggle to say whether the expression is a smile or a snarl. The parts are fine, the configuration is gone, and the configuration was the whole point. So you have a dedicated, fast, holistic face engine. Here's the problem nobody mentions. Fast and holistic is exactly the kind of system that's easy to fool, easy to overload, and easy to write over. It was never built to be an archive. It was built to make a snap decision and move on. You can lose this engine completely. There's a condition called prosopagnosia, face blindness, first described properly by Joachim Bodemer in 1947 after soldiers came back from the war with specific damage to that region of the brain. They could see a face perfectly. Eyes, nose, mouth, all there, all sharp. They simply could not tell whose face it was. Some couldn't recognize their own children. Some couldn't recognize themselves in a mirror. For a long time, the field assumed this was rare, only ever caused by injury. It isn't. There's a developmental form people are born with. The figure you'll usually hear is about 1 in 50, though the stricter recent studies suggest it may be less common than that. Either way, a real slice of the people you know walk around unable to reliably recognize faces and have built a lifetime of quiet workarounds. The voice, the haircut, the coat someone always wears. They've been compensating so long they may not know anything is different. Now here's the part that matters for everyone else. The 98% who think their face memory works fine. Even your healthy, intact engine is biased before you ever meet anyone. There's an effect so reliable it has its own decades of literature, the cross-race effect. You are measurably worse at telling apart and later recognizing the faces of people outside the racial group you grew up surrounded by. Christian Meissner and John Brigham pulled together 30 years of these studies in 2001, and the pattern was overwhelming and consistent. It isn't about prejudice. Infants show the tuning. Your face engine specializes early on the faces it sees most, gets very good at those, and treats the rest with a blurrier brush. So before any single encounter, your face machine is fast, holistic, fragile, and tuned. It already cares more about some faces than others. The question is, what decides which faces it actually keeps? And the answer is not how long you looked or how much you liked them. In 1996, a team led by Linda Mealy ran a study that should be more famous than it is, and the result is the spine of this whole video. They showed people a set of faces. Each face came with a short story, a description of the person's character. Some were described as trustworthy, some as ordinary, and some came with a story marking them as a cheater, someone who'd betrayed a trust, taken advantage of others. Then they sent everyone away. Later they brought them back and tested who they remembered. When they brought everyone back and tested memory, the headline result was that the faces tagged as cheaters seemed to stick better than the kind or the neutral ones. That finding lit up evolutionary psychology for years. But I have to flag something immediately, because this is exactly the kind of claim this channel exists to pressure test. The simplest version of it, that you straightforwardly recognize a cheater's face more reliably, has mostly failed to replicate. Hold on to that, because the part that did survive is more precise, and it's coming. Mealy's framing was evolutionary, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Imagine you live in a small group, the way humans did for almost all of our existence. The single most dangerous thing in your environment is not a predator. It's a person who will smile, take your help, and betray you the moment it pays. A brain that remembers the faces of those people specifically has a survival advantage that a brain with a perfect, even memory does not. You don't need to remember everyone. You need to remember who not to trust. I'll be honest with you, because this channel only works if I am. This finding has been argued over for 20 years. When Hauke Buchner and Raoul Bell and their colleagues went after it in the years that followed, they found something real but more specific. What gets enhanced isn't a vague feeling that you've seen the cheater before. It's source memory. You remember the context, the what they did bound tightly to the face. And some of their work suggests the effect isn't unique to cheating at all. That strongly negative, emotionally threatening descriptions do it too. The fight in the literature is about whether your brain has a dedicated cheater detector or a more general threat detector. Hold that question, because the next chapter is the threat detector showing its hand. Here's the mechanism underneath all of it. Your face engine, the fusiform area, doesn't decide on its own what to keep. It has a partner sitting right next to it, deeper in the temporal lobe, an almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. The amygdala's job is threat and emotional salience, and it has a direct line into memory. In 1996, Larry Cahill and James McGaugh and their team scanned people while they watched emotionally arousing material versus neutral material. The more the amygdala fired during an experience, the better that experience was remembered weeks later. Not how interesting it was, not how long they studied it, how much the amygdala lit. Emotion was, quite literally, the ink that made the memory permanent. Point that it faces, and you get exactly what you feel in real life. In 2001, Patrick Villemie and colleagues showed that fearful, threatening faces drive the amygdala harder than calm ones, even when people aren't paying attention to them, even when the face is barely processed. The threatening face jumps the queue. Years earlier, in 1988, Christine and Ranald Hansen ran the famous Face in the Crowd studies, and reported that an angry face pops out of a crowd of happy ones faster than a happy face pops out of a crowd of angry ones. We're tuned to find the threat. I'll flag it. That face in the crowd result has been picked apart since, and some of the original effect turned out to lean on low-level image quirks rather than pure emotion. But the core has held up across better controlled work. A face wearing a threat gets more processing, more amygdala, and more ink. The kind face gets a fast, cheap pass and fades. You are not keeping a fair record of the people you meet. You're keeping the ones your threat system underlined. Now the turn. Everything I've told you sounds like a superpower, a brain that locks onto danger. Here is the cost, and it is a real one. In 1987, Elizabeth Loftus, with Jeffrey Loftus and Jane Messo, ran an experiment with an eye tracker. People watched one of two scenes. In one, a person hands a cashier a check. In the other, the person pulls a gun. Then, they tested memory for the scene, including the face. The people who saw the gun remembered the face worse. Their eyes on the tracker had locked onto the weapon. It's called weapon focus. Under real threat, attention narrows to the source of danger, and the face, the thing you'd most need later to identify the person, gets starved of the very processing that would have saved it. So the threat system is a double agent. A described threat, a story of betrayal, burns a face in. But a live physical threat in the moment can do the opposite. It narrows you onto the knife and leaves the face thin, half-encoded, a sketch. And a thin, half-encoded face is the most dangerous kind of memory there is, because your brain does not store it as thin. It hands it back to you later feeling complete and certain. This is not a small problem. When the Innocence Project went back through the first hundreds of convictions overturned by DNA evidence, mistaken eyewitness identification was the single largest contributing factor, present in the majority of them. Confident witnesses picking the wrong face out of a lineup, certain, not lying. Their face engine handed them a fabrication and stamped it as a memory, and a person went to prison for it. The liar's face you're holding from Chapter 1, sharp and certain. Now you know it can run the other way. The same machinery that refuses to forget the person who wronged you can, under the right kind of fear, invent a face that was never there. Step back and ask why evolution would build a face memory this lopsided. Why not just remember everyone accurately? Because accuracy is expensive, and it was never the goal. For nearly all of human history, you lived among a small, mostly fixed set of people. You did not need a perfect database. You needed two things: fast. Is this person a member of my group? And have they ever cost me? A system that spends its limited memory on the faces tagged with betrayal and threat and lets the safe and neutral faces wash out is not broken. It is efficient at the only problem that used to matter. And the binding I mentioned, the source memory, is the clever part. Your brain doesn't just keep the face. It tries to keep the face stapled to what the person did, who lied, who helped, who you owe. That stapling is the entire social ledger our ancestors ran their lives on, and it ran without writing, without names, on faces alone. The trouble is that you no longer live in a village of 100 people. You walk past thousands of strangers, see hundreds of faces on a screen before breakfast, meet people once and never again. You're running Stone Age face software on a world it was never designed for. So it does what it was built to do. It forgets the overwhelming, harmless majority, keeps the few it flagged as a threat, and every so often, under fear, it fills a gap with a face that fits and tells you that's the one. So let's put it back together. And then, I want to leave you with the one thing you can actually do with it. You are not bad with faces. You have a dedicated face engine that is fast, holistic, and fragile by design. It is tuned before you meet anyone, biased toward the faces you grew up around. It does not keep a fair record. It keeps the faces your amygdala underlined, the threats and the betrayals. And it lets the kind and the neutral and the safe slip quietly out. And in the moment of real danger, it can starve the very face you'll be asked to identify later, then hand you back a confident fake. The person who walks up to you, warm and certain, the one you can't place. Sit with what your brain is actually telling you about them. It's not saying you weren't paying attention. It's saying, in its old and wordless way, that this person never registered as a threat. You forgot them because you were safe with them. That's worth knowing before you feel bad about it. And the one liver. Knowing the bias exists is the only real defense against the worst version of it. When you are certain you recognize a face from a frightening moment, that certainty is the least trustworthy thing in the room, because that is exactly the condition under which your brain fabricates. The people most sure they've got the right face are, the data says, often the ones who don't. Doubt the confident face, especially your own. There's a deeper version of this, what your brain does to the faces of the people you love, the ones you see every day until you stop really seeing them at all. But that's the next investigation. If you want that one when it lands, subscribe, because the next piece of you that's been quietly edited is already in the works. I'll see you in the next